So hi everyone, and welcome to another Sunday Zoom meeting. Let me just mute all the participants. Done. And Eli, if you want to take yourself off mute as my co-host, you can go ahead. So we are going to continue our journey through the miracle principles of A Course in Miracles, and we have come up to miracle principle number 23. And today we're going to spend a good bit of time. We may just do miracle principle 24, but we'll see how it goes. And this is a sticky one and a controversial one. And people are going to understand this differently. And you're going to have to make your mind up about what it means for you. But I'm going to tell you about what it means for me and why. So let's have a look at this principle. Miracles enable you to heal the sick and raise the dead, because you made sickness and death yourself and can therefore abolish both. You are a miracle, capable of creating in the likeness of your creator. Everything else is your own nightmare and does not exist. Only the creations of light are real. Okay, so there's so many levels to this. Let's see where we'll begin. All right, we're going to return to our story that we have visited a number of times, and it is the story of the apparent separation. So, into eternity, where all is one, there crept that tiny mad idea, at which the Son of God forgot to laugh. And this was simply amusing, an idea. What would it be like if there was an opposite to oneness, if there was separateness? It was not a rebellion against heaven. It was not an attack on God. It was an idea that was explored on some level, okay? And with the idea, it seemed like it happened, the impossible. So it was amusing on what would it be like if the impossible happened? I mean, it can't happen, but what would it be like if it did? And then it seemed like it happened. Okay. And so heaven, where there is no separate consciousness, there is no God to perceive himself in relation to his creation, and no creation to perceive itself in relation to God. There is just a oneness joined as one, a perfect oneness, one light. We could see God as the source of light, and there are all the rays of light that extend from God, and there's nowhere where God ends and the sun begins. There's nowhere where the source of light ends and where the ray of light begins. And that's our heaven. Okay. And into that crept the idea, what if it wasn't like this? What if there was actually like a break? What if there was a me that could know itself in relation to God? Which is impossible, but what would that be like? And then it seemed like it happened. And this is consciousness. And so consciousness is now an apparently separated Son of God that has split off from God and Christ as a oneness joined as one, and goes, oh my God, this has happened. Okay. So consciousness being a split, the first split introduced into the mind after the separation, it continues to split, and consciousness splits into the ego and the Holy Spirit. And the ego is the part that's saying, oh my God, this is real. I've actually done this. I have broken free of heaven. I am a me. I am not a oneness joined as one. And the other, so that's wrong-minded consciousness, and right-minded consciousness is the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit is, it simply looks on this idea and doesn't believe it. It doesn't respond to it because it's illusory. It can't be true. So at this point, the apparently separated Son of God has a decision to make. Okay, do I go with the the thought that separateness is real, or do I go with the thought that says what's separateness? And a decision was made, which was to go with the ego. And with that decision, the Holy Spirit gets walled off, split off in the mind. Now, instantly, this is reality. This is full-blown psychosis. This is like, this is real. I've actually done this. Okay, now, for storytelling purposes, I'm going to do the same thing as Jesus does, and I'm going to talk about the ego like it's a thing, like it's an entity, right? It is not. It is a thought system. It is a way of thinking. So really, when I'm talking about the ego, I'm talking about consciousness when it is wrong-minded, okay? The way in which thoughts will happen, okay, based on the beliefs that are accepted. But for the points of the story, I'm going to talk about the ego like an entity. Please don't think the ego is a demon or a devil or anything like that. It is not. It is simply a thought system, that is all, which is based on separateness being real. Okay, so the apparently separated son, having made a decision for the ego, now sort of becomes the ego. Okay. And there is this idea that this existence as a separate thing is tenuous, that there is some higher power here. So the ego believes there is some higher power here that can choose against this and it's all going to be over. And so a strategy emerges because the higher power is the decision maker, the decision to choose against separateness and be the memory of the oneness. Okay, so a strategy is now put in place which will get rid of the problem as the ego sees it, which is the ability of the son's mind to choose, to simply choose against separateness being true. Okay, so this is the ego's problem. This is the big problem the ego has, is that it could end in a heartbeat because there's this higher power that can choose against it. And so a strategy emerges, which is to make the son mindless so that he cannot choose against the ego. Now, the ego doesn't know about the Holy Spirit, but it knows there is a threat to its existence. Okay. And so this strategy is that the son must become mindless. If he is mindless, he cannot undo what's been done. He cannot simply choose against separateness, the ego. Okay, so the first thing then, the ego instructs us. Now, really, this is just our own thoughts. This is a way of thinking, but the ego is instructing the Son of God. And this is where the idea of the rebellion against God is born. Okay, because the ego tells us, now you have succeeded. Separateness is real. Heaven was brought down. You brought down heaven to be a me. You killed oneness. You rebelled against God, okay? Because there's a you. If there's a you, if there is separateness, then oneness can't exist anymore because it's one or the other. You can't have separateness and oneness at the same time. One of them is not true. And so if I accept the belief that separateness is real, that means oneness is not real. It can't be. It has ended. It has come to an end. I've destroyed it. It was me or God. I chose me. It's done. So that's what the ego tells us. So you have succeeded, but the price is terrible. You have attacked God. You've brought down heaven. You've destroyed everything that was holy and loving in the universe. And you've done that to win this freedom. So now the realization is that sin, because that's what we call it, that's what the ego calls it, sin. We have sinned against God, and the inevitability is the horrific, crushing, self-loathing guilt that I'm left with. And then inevitably, there is the fear that God's coming back. There's no way he's going to take this lying down. He is coming for me. And so basically the ego tells us, I won't go into the third split. We talked about that before. I'm just going to keep it simple, right? Where we split off the guilt, and the guilt seems like God, and we leave our mind. So we know that's what happens on the third split, but let's not go into that in too much detail. Basically, the ego informs us that we don't stand a prayer. He's God. He's going to crush you. He's going to end what you took from him, because he will do that to restore oneness. You do not have a prayer. You cannot stay on the battleground of your mind. That's where he's coming for you. You've got to get out of Dodge. So basically, the one problem that the ego has is the son's power to choose against it for the memory of heaven, and that oneness is still there. That's the one problem the ego has. That is the only problem there is as far as the ego is concerned. And what the ego does is it makes up a new problem as a shield against the real problem. So the ego convinces the son, and he says, yes, you're separate. That's not the problem. The problem is what you had to do to get it, the terrible guilt that you have, and the inevitability and the awfulness of God's reprisal for it. So this is completely made up. God was never attacked. There was an idea in heaven. What would it be like? It seemed like it happened. Consciousness emerges. We choose the ego, the belief in consciousness, rather than the Holy Spirit that says what consciousness. And now the ego realizes the only problem now is that a higher power can end this in a heartbeat.
If you do, the other computer's going away.
So the ego has made up a new problem, which is completely non-existent. It says God was attacked, heaven was destroyed, you are this awfulness, you are the home of evil, darkness, and sin. And we now, this is our problem. This is our problem. So the ego has made up this story of sin, guilt, and fear, which is completely untrue. There is no truth to it whatsoever, but this story has been made up to shield us from the Holy Spirit's correction, the ability of the Son's mind to choose against all of this and be whole. So sin, guilt, and fear does not exist. It's a made-up problem to cover up, to be a smokescreen about the original problem, which is the Son's ability to choose against the ego. So now this is a problem because the guilt is awful. And so now there's another solution, which is the fourth split, and it is project everything outside of your mind, leave your mind, project yourself into the world that you've projected, and become mindless. Close off the door to your mind forever. Become mindless within the world. And so we made up the world because we're listening to the ego. In other words, we're thinking with the ego thought system. That's the software that's running on the Son's mind. So there is one problem, which is the decision of the mind to choose. A new problem is completely manufactured, which is the existence of sin, guilt, and fear. And this is to cover over the real problem, which is the mind's ability to choose. And now a new solution comes out. Okay, so this is the second shield and the double shield of Oblivion, which is the world. And the sole purpose of the world is to protect us from the sin, guilt, and fear in our mind. And the sole purpose of the sin, guilt, and fear in our mind is to protect us from the love. So we have the love of the Holy Spirit. We have a shield, which is this manufactured idea that there is sin, guilt, and fear. And then we manufacture a world to protect us from the shield of sin, guilt, and fear. So that's metaphysically what has happened. So God hasn't made the world. He knows nothing about it. There is no such thing in reality as bodies and people and animals and plants and flowers and sky and earth and sea. It doesn't exist. It is what Ken Wapnick would call, what would he call it now? Someone's on the tip of my tongue there a moment. A maladaptive solution to a non-existent problem. So the world is a maladaptive solution to the non-existent problem of sin, guilt, and fear, because it's an illusion. And the sin, guilt, and fear was a maladaptive solution to the non-existent problem of the ego and the son's ability to choose against it. So Jesus says, the world rose from the guilt to keep the guilt hidden. And that's the only purpose the world had. So we're hiding out in the world, seeing evil outside of us instead of inside of us. That's the shield. Because we now find ourselves in the world and the evil is not in me. The sin is not in me. The guilt is not in me. Now the fear is still in me, but now I'm afraid of the evil things out there and what they want to do to me and what they're going to do to me and what they have done to me. But there's nothing out there. So I get to keep my fear, but I've given the sin away. So if we were to take a reading here, judgment is but a toy, a whim. This is from chapter 20, the vision of holiness, paragraph 7. So judgment is but a whim, a toy, a whim, the senseless means to play the idle game of death in your imagination. So that's like when we look with the ego, we're going to have judgment. And Jesus says this is, a toy, a whim, a senseless means to play this imaginary game of death in your mind. But now he wants to talk about vision. What happens when we look with the Holy Spirit? And here's what he says, because this is what looking with the Holy Spirit does. But vision sets all things right, bringing them gently within the kindly sway of heaven's laws. What if you recognize this world is an hallucination? What if you really understood you made it up? What if you realized that those who seem to walk about in it, to sin and die, attack and murder and destroy themselves are wholly unreal? Could you have faith in what you see if you accepted this? And would you see it? So I have a split mind. And when I identify with the lowest aspect of myself, the body, the insane voice talking to itself, now I am going to feel lacking and wanting and needing and guilty, and I'm going to deny it all and split it off and project it out and look at the world and go, you did it to me. You're the reason for this. You're the reason for my fear. But the whole thing's made up. So when Jesus says, what if you really understood you made it up? He's not talking to Keith. There's no Keith. Keith is the figure in the dream. Jesus is talking to the dreamer of the dream here. The mind that made the world as a defense against the guilt, so it could see it outside of itself and not have to look at it within. Okay, so that's who he's talking to here. What if you really understood you made it up? What if you realized that those who seem to walk about in it, to sin and die, attack and murder and destroy themselves are wholly unreal? So when I identify as a body and an insane voice talking to itself, I will automatically see everything outside me as bodies that I'm making real and personalities that I'm making real. But if I step back from that, if I step back from identifying as the body, the insane voice talking to itself, and I join Jesus above the battleground, then from there, I can say, this whole thing's a dream. Because I touch into the identity I have there in Jesus, with Jesus, outside the movie. And now, when I look at the movie, I would see what I am as the truth shining behind an illusion. That God is one Son. So it's only when I identify as the dream character that I will look on the world as real. But if I step back into the dreamer of the dream position, which is what above the battleground means, now I can say this whole thing is made up. Because the oneness, the completeness, the wholeness, the holiness that I connect into where Jesus is, that's all I see everywhere I look. Behind a harmless movie of separateness and fragmentation. So if I identify, if I go with that first pronoun error that says I, me, the separate self, me, the body, then suddenly all the other pronoun errors come into being. And now suddenly the pronoun error of you and he and she and it and them and those, they all come into existence. So Jesus says, if you make a self for yourself, you got to make a self for everyone else. And that's what happens. But if I disidentify from this self, if I become a non-judgmental observer in the Holy Spirit, not Keith, a decision maker lets go of Keith and becomes a non-judgmental observer, then that's where I see this whole thing is made up. And so that's the holy instant. And this is why Jesus says, never forget you give but to yourself. Who understands what giving means must laugh at the idea of sacrifice, nor can he fail to recognize the many forms which sacrifice may take. He laughs as well at pain and loss, at sickness and at grief, at poverty, starvation, and at death. He recognizes sacrifice remains the one idea that stands behind them all, and in his gentle laughter, are they healed? Now, if I am identified as a body, as an insane voice talking to itself, and I am laughing at poverty, starvation, and at death, well, it means I am what the world calls a psychopath. And so that's not what Jesus is saying. He's not saying, you, Keith, go and laugh at the suffering that you see in the world. That's not what he's saying. That would be incredibly wrong-minded. And so instead, what he's saying is he's not speaking to Keith because there's no Keith. He's speaking to the dreamer of the dream. And so when, as a decision maker, I disidentify from the separate self and I go back into the position of non-judgmental awareness, that's where I understand this whole thing is made up, because this awareness is all that there is. The awareness I am is what I know is everywhere. Behind the dream of people living and dying and murdering and killing themselves. Okay, so oneness and sickness cannot exist. Well, let's go down a little bit. This is from the manual, chapter 12, How Many Teachers of God Are Needed to Save the World. Awareness of dreaming is the real function of God's teachers. They watch the dream figures come and go, shift and change, suffer and die, yet they are not deceived by what they see. They recognize that to behold a dream figure as sick and separate is no more real than to regard it as healthy and beautiful. Unity alone is not a thing of dreams, and it is this God's teachers acknowledge as behind the dream, beyond all seeming, and yet surely theirs. In that position I'm in, above the battleground, identifying as awareness, and which is the dreamer of the dream and not the dream figure. The unity is the fact that what I am is what is all there is. It doesn't matter whether there's in the movie, there's like a sick person or a well person. There's just unity. That's a dream. And there's just unity. There's God's one son. So I think that it's very easy for our ego to get very carried away with miracle principle number 24. Miracles enable you to heal the sick and raise the dead because you made sickness and death yourself and can therefore abolish both. The dream is purposive. We did not write the dream so dogs stayed puppies forever. We did not write the dream so we got sexier as we got older. We did not write the dream so, we could have good weather all the time. We did not write the dream so, gosh, we could go on and on and on, there was always rainbows in the sky. Fairies are real, whatever. The dream is purposive. It's not random. We designed the dream so we could see the evil we believe in ourselves outside in everything that's made up. And so we can feel innocent by going, you're the guilty one. You're the sinner. You're the bad one. I am the innocent victim. So my belief that I am the victimizer of God is now seen outside in the world. And none of it's real. It's a story that's been made up so I can see evil people out there, unholy people out there. Okay, so let's take one more quote. Well, I think I pretty much know this one. You'll know lesson 93. I don't think I need to look it up. The self you made is not the son of God. Therefore, this self does not exist at all. It is neither bad nor good. It is unreal and nothing more than that. Okay, so there's no Keith. You, as the dreamer of the dream, dreamed a dream where you dreamed about Keith. And Eli, and Sparkle. And the trees and the flowers. And Kellett Wapnick, and you dreamt the whole thing. Okay. So there's no Keith. And there's no you that you think you are. And there's no people out there suffering and dying, shifting and changing. There's none of that. There is the unity, which is the recognition that there is just God's one son. So a very important phrase in the course where Jesus says, he says, there is no world. This is the central message this course seeks to teach. And he goes on to say, you can only go as far as you're willing to go with that for now, and you may broach this idea and run away from it and come back to it. But ultimately, this is what you need to understand. There's no world. Absolutely no world. And he also says, seek not to change the world. Seek to change your mind about the world. The world is there to protect you from having to look at the guilt in yourself. That's its purpose. That's why it was made. So you did not have to look at the guilt in your own mind. That's why we, as this dreamer of the dream, made a story up about murderers and war criminals and rapists and child murderers and killer animals and killer sharks and bad weather and tragedies, and we made the whole thing up. And you did it because you could look outside and go, that's awful. Isn't that terrible? Which stops you from looking inside and going, that terribleness is mine. That's what I believe about myself. It's any purpose the world has. So the miracle worker, Jesus says, the sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself, which means the whole thing never happened. Separateness never happened. Okay, so with the miracle, the thing we've been drilling over and over again for the last, quite intensely for the last 2 months, the miracle looks on devastation and reminds the mind that what it sees is false. The miracle establishes you dream a dream and its content is not true. So what you're seeing is a content, well, that's maybe me using content differently. What you're seeing is a form which hides content. The content is the guilt, self-loathing, hatred in my mind. And the form it's going to take in the world is the killers and the murderers and the people that messed me around and the people that treated me badly and betrayed me and embarrassed me and beat me and whatever else the case may be. And so it would be a mistake because it's very tempting when I'm identified as an ego for me to think that this miracle principle is saying, I'm going to go out there as a holy ego and I'm going to visit the hospital and everyone's going to sit up from their beds from death in the morgue and it's wonderful. Now, if I do that, I am saying God's Son is a body. I am saying sickness is real. I'm saying egos are real. The people we made up. If we return to, what if you really understood you made it up? What if you realized that those who seem to walk about in it, to sin and die, attack and murder and destroy themselves are wholly unreal? You made it up. And you made it up so you could not have to look at the self-hatred and fear and guilt in your own mind. The answer is not that I go to what I made up, make it real, and try to make it better. That's not the answer. Again, when I attack the Christ in myself to identify as Keith, a body in the world, an insane voice talking to itself in my mind, once I do that, it is very tempting to go, I will be this wonderful miracle worker. I'm going to fix the world. I'm going to change the world instead of changing my mind about it. Instead of letting the miracle remind me that what I see is false, that I dream a dream and its content is not true. Keith's never going to see that. Keith is the figure in the dream. I've got to identify as the dreamer of the dream, and that means letting go of the ego's hand. Okay, the only thing I have to do to fall back into the arms of the Holy Spirit or Jesus to go where they are is choose against the ego. Choose against being the separate thing. Choose against being the body. Choose against being the insane voice talking to itself in my mind. And when I do that, I understand I'm dreaming a dream and it is purposive. And the horrors I see out there are to protect me from realizing that's the horrors I believe are inside myself. So that's what the miracle is. I look at the form something takes, which is someone betraying me or attacking me or beating me. And I step outside of being the thing that's being attacked. And I understand this is a dream and that is happening in the dream. So I didn't have to look at the fact that I believe I'm guilty, that I'm the attacker, that I'm the bad person. And so whatever bad feelings are coming up for me, whatever judgment and hatred and, this is a bad thing and this is a bad person, that's just a projection of what I believe about myself onto a movie that's not true. Okay. But if I come back and I step out of ego and I become this non-judgmental awareness with the Holy Spirit, everything that I'm feeling will end. And I can look again at the movie and know it's harmless. That's what forgiveness is. The harmlessness in me sees the harmlessness in everything that's out there. The awareness in me sees itself in everything. It doesn't stop at the illusion and make it real. And it doesn't stop at the illusion and go, it's an illusion. It looks beyond the illusion to the truth. That's what we've got to do. And that's why I can only find my innocence by seeing it in everything and everyone. I can't find my innocence by going, yeah, but it's all made up. Okay. Jesus says the temple of the Holy Spirit is the relationship. I can only find my innocence by seeing it in everything I look upon. So again, the miracle worker is not walking into morgues going, who's next to get resurrected. That is not what a miracle worker does. The miracle worker understands that there's no death, that there's nothing here, that there's nothing living, that there's nothing dying. There is this one truth, this one Son of God, this one dreamer of the dream, which it sees everywhere. It falls back into, I fall back as a decision maker into innocence. And I only see that innocence everywhere. Now, when I fall back and experience that innocence in my own mind, and I now look and see that innocence in another person, that's what healing is. Only minds are healed. Only guilt needs to be healed. And once that happens, that may have effects in the world, like people getting better, people being more peaceful, people making their peace with dying. It's going to take lots of different forms, miraculous, rebounding from an illness. It's going to take lots of different forms. The miracle worker doesn't care about any of that, because all it sees is the deathless, innocent, whole Christ shining the same in absolutely everyone, knowing nothing, none of the rest of it's real. It's not trying to fix the people we made up. All that does is confirms that they are bodies, that they are broken, that they can be vulnerable. It makes the error real and tries to fix it. So the miracle worker falls back into a place where he knows the truth of himself, and what I am, everything is. And as I see everything, that's what I am. So we could think about it this way. Forgiveness is where, what I see outside me is what I am. So forgiveness is cleaning that up. And healing is where what I am, everything is. So we use forgiveness to clean up what we're seeing outside, because it's what's inside me. And now that I know what's inside me, that's what I extend. And that's healing. So let's see if there's anything else we wanted to say about this miracle principle. Miracles enable you to heal the sick and raise the dead. Yes, absolutely it does. Because we made up the whole dream. You, as the dreamer of the dream, you made this whole thing to cover up your own guilt and see it outside of yourself. Could you change, the whole thing? Yes. But again, the dream was purposive. We didn't make it so we could be happy bodies. We made it so we could be innocent victims instead of guilty victimizers. You are a miracle. Now, Jesus is using miracle there very differently than everywhere else. He uses the word miracle in the course, so we don't want to take that too literally. You are a miracle. He's talking about you are a creation of God. And you are capable of creating in the likeness of your creator. This has nothing to do with the world. This is not talking about the dream. There is no creation here. Jesus says there's no life outside heaven. Anything here is a parody of life. It's a desert. So Jesus is saying you are a miracle creating in the likeness of your creator. That is your reality in heaven that you have never left. But it's got nothing to do with you going in and starting to create in the world or the dream. Everything else is your own nightmare. This whole world, your own nightmare, and it does not exist. Only the creation of light are real. So only God and his extension of himself and his extensions of himself extending him. That's what's going on. That's what's true. That's what's right. Everything else is a smoke screen against that. The world is a smoke screen against the sin, guilt, and fear. So we made up the world to hide the sin, guilt, and fear in our mind. And we made up the sin, guilt, and fear to hide from the memory of heaven, the creations of light. That's a whole lot to throw at you there on miracle principle number 24. If you think changing the world is important, you're insane. The purpose the world was created for was to be a smokescreen, one gigantic big smokescreen to cover up the fact that all the evil things you see out there is what you think about yourself. That was what it was created for. Now the Holy Spirit wants to use it as a classroom where he goes, the guilt you're seeing in this, the culpability you're seeing in this, the wrongness you're seeing in this, that's what you feel about yourself. Take it back. Undo projection. Okay? So the Holy Spirit doesn't want us to go trying to change the world. The Holy Spirit wants us to change its purpose. Rather than keeping the sin away from me, keeping the guilt away from me, now I'm going, that's the smoke screen against what I believe in myself. Let me ask for that to be undone. And when it's undone, I look on a forgiven world. So the world becomes a classroom. We made it as a prison to keep ourselves mindless and to keep seeing everyone else as evil apart from ourselves, and to actually go through our entire life going, this is the problem. The politicians are the problem. My boss is the problem. My body is the problem. Other people's body is the problem. Sickness is the problem. COVID-19 is the problem. The vaccinations are the problem. The doctors are the problem. And all these problems are to cover up the problem that my sin, guilt, and fear that I don't want to look at, and this is distracting it for me. And the sin, guilt, and fear was just made up so I wouldn't look at the love in my mind. So that's what's going on. All right. Bring it on. What do you want to ask me about that? Where should we go first, Eli?
There is a question that we should start with,
Okay.
Before Freddie had put his hand up. So let's start with that question. It's from Sharon. Why would we dream of Kenneth Wapnick and the Course? I think she had put that up when you were talking just how you were, how we created all this crap so we can throw it on somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. When we wrote a movie, which basically everything is simply a way of covering up guilt. Every murder, every atrocity, every war. So we wrote the whole thing because, that's going to be the problem. I'm not the problem. The sin is not in me. It's out there. It's in them. But there's nobody out there, right? So we did that. And then, and so that's why, Jesus repeatedly in the Course says this world was over long ago. It seems like you're making decisions now for the first time, but you're not. The whole thing is written. And so for every single symbol we put there, which was to cover up guilt, the Holy Spirit gave an answer. So now we come into the very controversial issue of two movie libraries, two scripts. Okay. Now, it's very important to understand that the two scripts are not different events per se. It is different ways of looking at events and a different purpose for events. And it is turning separate interests into shared interests. And so what I would say is that everything that's happening here is the atonement. For everything that happens to us, there are two ways we can approach that. We can have it cement separateness and separate interests, or we can have it undo that and have the correction express itself as shared interests in the situation, where it's not one or the other. It's not the ego thought system. It's one and the other. And so this entire world really, because there's no people, there's just thoughts. And we're all just thoughts resolving each other in the mind. You know, Ram Dass says we're all just walking each other home. And literally, we're all just waking each other up. We're all just screens for each other onto which we can project our guilt. But now that unconscious guilt is actually available to us to undo. That's why our brother is our savior, because we will project all of our guilt onto him, which was unconscious and couldn't be touched, but now it can be seen. It's shining in my brother, where I can take it back into myself again and have it undone, because there's no such thing as guilt. We made it up. And so everything that's happening is the atonement. And part of the atonement is A Course in Miracles. Part of the atonement is Buddhism. Part of the atonement is Christianity. Part of the atonement is, it's all part of the atonement. All things work together for good except the ego's judgment. What could you not accept if you but knew that all things, past, present, and to come, are gently planned by one whose only interest is your good? And so the thing is, if I look on the world from wrong-minded consciousness, which is from the belief that separateness is real, and I'm a me, I'm a separate self, I'm an insane voice talking to itself, a private mind, a personal mind, a body. If I'm in wrong-minded consciousness, then the world is perfect, because it is a perfect smoke screen for guilt. I can see it outside myself and go, that's where it is. But if I switch to right-minded consciousness, which is the Holy Spirit, then suddenly the world is a perfect classroom, because instantly everywhere I'm seeing guilt in the world is mine, and I can undo it. And what's more, when we learn to forgive, and when we learn to step out of identifying as the separate thing, and when we step back into that non-judgmental observer we are in the Holy Spirit, if you like, we have turned our back on the world and said, right, that's nothing to do with me. And I've come back up above the battleground, and I've remembered what I am. And now I look back towards the world. Now there is a spiritual intelligence can operate through my body, which can bless the world. It's not Keith. It's got nothing to do with Keith. But it is the Holy Spirit, and it is, and it will be the atonement. It will be the plan of salvation, and I get to bless the dream. And you know, A Course in Miracles is one of those blessings, where it can make a substantive difference. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. We're all just thoughts working each other out, resolving the conflicts, to go back and remember we're the dreamer of the dream.
Thank you.
Okay, so should
Okay.
we go to Freddie?
Yes, Freddie is next.
You're up, Freddie. Be gentle with me.
Okay, I tend to take it somewhat personally, this dream, and knowing that there really isn't a personal self, it kind of makes more sense to me to see the dream as a collective dream, which is a collective dream of all the sonship. You know, when I look at the horrors in the world, I've tended, because of the language that is being used, like you say, guilt that you see in the world is your guilt. right?
Mhm.
It may be that is the case if we're all one mind, that it is my guilt. But I see that the guilt in the world is a collective dream of guilt and sin. And that kind of makes it easier for me to swallow that, to accept that, rather
It's
than
both.
it's my personal dream
Yeah.
of guilt, sin, and fear.
Well, there's two dimensions to this. On the one hand, there is the world, which is already written. All right. And then there is, when you identify as a personal self, you make a self for yourself. The self that's not the Son of God, and that nothing it says or does means anything. You have now made a self for yourself, and you will now look at the movie and you will work out a dream. You will work out stories about all the movie characters. And you're going to look at, your neighbors, and you are going to have stories in your mind about who they are and what they're about and whether they're good or whether they're bad. And the person next door to you is going to look at the same neighbors and see them completely different. He is not going to see the same thing at all that you look at when you see your neighbors. So this is a bit like Russian dolls, okay? In the sense that, so yes, there is this one dreamer of the dream, but all the individual dream figures are now having their own dream within the dream. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it's a collective dream.
The movie is. The movie of the world that was over long ago, yes, that's a done deal. So that, but again, it's not a collective dream because it was dreamed by one split mind. Okay, but within the dream.
But wasn't that before the split mind split into the billions of?
Exactly. That's why it's one mind. So rather than a collective, well, we could say from this perspective that it's a collective dream in the sense that we all are that one split mind, fragments of it. But holographic fragments of it. So we could say in that sense, it's a collective dream. But I think the point is that once we misidentify as a body and a separate self, and we make a self up for ourselves, now we actually, because again, Jesus says, the world I see means nothing at all. Nothing I see means anything at all, right? Because once it was made, it was neutral. It's not good or bad or right or wrong or anything. It's just a movie. But now what I will do is I will actually write my script. That neighbor's a bad person. I know that. This neighbor is a good guy because he talked nice to me. And so I now have my dream within the dream. And that's why Jesus does talk about separate worlds, private worlds, and where, sin is never seen in the same place by any fragment. No two people see sin the same way. I could be appalled by something and think it's the worst thing imaginable. And I would talk to my friends about it and they'd go, yeah, but you know what I mean? How can you say that? Like, oh my God. And so nobody sees sin in the same way. So these are the private worlds Jesus is talking about, which is just the figures in the dream having their own dreams. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think because there are so many of us seeming separated sons that we all must be having our own dream.
Yeah.
And that's why I call it a collective dream.
Yeah.
I know that the dream began with the first split from heaven.
There's two dreams. Okay, so there's the secret dream, which we don't know about down here, which is the belief in sin, guilt, and fear, that we did do this to God, that we're guilty, and that he's coming to get us. So we don't want to look at that at all. And then what we do is we make up the world's dream in order to get away from that. So that's the two dreams, the secret dream and the world dream. But then even within the world's dream, each apparently separate self is dreaming their own interpretation of the dream. So that's kind of like the Russian doll situation.
I just didn't want to take on too much personal responsibility for what I perceive as a collective dream. I didn't want to completely own it myself, partly because of the fact there is no separate self, me, Freddie, the dream figure. And it doesn't make sense to me as the separated dream figure, or even as my mind, my position of awareness, which is aware of the dream, doesn't make sense to not see it as a collective responsibility, the appearance of the dream in the world.
See, you have to be careful with that, because what you're doing is, on some level, you're saying it's monstrous and it's appalling, and I'm not taking on the responsibility for it. Now, there's your error straight away. It is nothing. The world I see means nothing, right? I have given it all the meaning it has for me. So the problem is not what's happening in the movie. The problem is you think it's appalling. And the appallingness you see in the movie is the appallingness you don't want to look at in yourself. Remember, we want the world to be real, so it's not in us. Okay, so this is an entire course where you look on the world and you have feelings about it. You have judgments about it, and that you understand this is a classroom. Okay, I'm seeing the guilt which is in me. I've denied it, I split it off, I've projected it out into a non-existent world, and I've went, you're the problem. So you need to look at the fact that you're looking at the world and going, it's monstrous and it's appalling. And we're all collectively responsible for it, and it's bad. No. What all you want to do is notice that you are seeing guilt and you are seeing cause in the world, and understand now, this is where I do the miracle. This is where I look at the forgiveness, because the guilt I am seeing out there is my own. Because there's no world out there. Does that make sense? That's where you can easily go off track here, where you're saying, but the world is awful. The world is evil, and someone's responsible for it, and I don't want it to be me. So you'll go off track straight away on that one, because the world is neutral. You must understand the world is neutral. That's why Jesus says, you know, if you could just accept that the world doesn't mean anything, that it has no meaning, and let the meaning be written on it for you, you would be indescribably happy.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So you're putting a meaning on the world.
Yeah, it's a process with me.
Of course.
The more I come to the groups, the more understanding I seem
like us all
have. Yeah,
discover. Like us all, Freddie. So just bear that in mind, is that the world is not awful. The world is not horrific. You are projecting that meaning onto something that doesn't mean anything in order to be free of it yourself. And the miracle is where you take it back. So you can look on a forgiven world and go, again, let's go back to our quote here, right? Awareness of dreaming is the real function of God's teachers. They watch the dream figures come and go, shift and change, suffer and die, yet they are not deceived by what they see.
It's going to be a very big shift, a giant step or a giant leap to actually get to the point where I don't believe in the world as a real experience.
Yeah, but you're not asked to deny your experience of the world, right? You're not asked to do that. You're only asked to change its purpose. And that means that you're changing it from the belief that it is this awful, evil prison, awful place out there. And you change your teachers and you understand now it's a classroom. What I'm seeing in the world is what I don't want to look at in myself. So you're not trying to make the world disappear. You're not trying to, go, there's no world or anything like that. Not as Freddie. That's useless for me to do that as Keith. I have to, for me to have that experience, I have to have an experience of the holy instant where I step out of identification as Keith. But in the meantime, all you're asked to do is change the purpose the world has. And that's going to undo the blocks to the awareness of love's presence in your mind. So you can access that love much more easily in lots more situations and have much more holy instants.
Well, thank you.
Again, yeah, so it's about you seeing the awfulness out there and going, okay, that's a projection of the awfulness in me. So let's fix this. Let's ask for it to be undone by not blaming the world, by having me be totally peaceful, because what does it have to do with me? What does what's happening in the world have to do with my peace of mind? Nothing. And so I ask it to be removed so I can look on the world and be peaceful.
But at the same time, I don't think I want to take it too personally, because there is no personal me. there's my awareness, the part of my mind which is connected with God.
What, you have a split mind?
I don't even think that's personal. The personal is the figure in the dream.
Yeah, but
That's personal self.
the course is not asking you to delete yourself. It's not
No,
asking
I
you to undo
didn't mean
yourself.
that.
Yeah. So what it's asking us to do is to let go of our identification as an ego, a
Sure.
wrong mind, but experience ourselves as a right mind.
Yeah. You see, what I mean by that is,
Yeah.
you do keep asserting that there is no Keith, there is no Freddie. I don't take that as deleting myself. I take that as identifying with the true part of my mind, which is
The right-minded part. Yes.
Yeah, which is the awareness.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. But again, you do have a split mind, which is going to make you keep identifying as Freddie.
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay,
Yeah.
and the reason for that is that the guilt will become evident in your mind, and you'll go out into the world to be protected from it. So really, the only thing we want to do with the world is allow the world to bring us back into our mind, where we can undo the guilt that we're seeing in the world.
But ultimately, you're saying there is no Freddie. You're
Yeah,
saying there is no world.
Yeah. However, I'm not saying there's no you.
No, but I'm what I know as myself is not the dream figure. It's the part of my mind which is projecting the dream figure and projecting the whole dream.
That's your right mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah. So again, people get confused about this when they go, but there is no Keith. It's like, yeah, but I've never been Keith. Keith is just a manufactured story. So I'm not the wrong mind, but that doesn't mean I don't exist. I am the right mind. And so the decision maker joined with the Holy Spirit is a non-judgmental observer, which is a pure awareness. And within that awareness burns the memory of heaven, where there is a peace and a joy and a love. And that's what we discover when we disidentify as the person and fall back into identification as awareness, the right mind. So again, if anyone's listening, I don't want anyone to have the idea that we're saying, you know, you don't exist. Of course you exist. What God creates is eternal, unchanging, absolute, and unassailable. You're just not what you think you are. And that when you're ready, you can choose against that allegiance.
You said God didn't create bodies.
Correct.
So on one hand, you're saying that it seems like you're saying you do exist as a figure in the dream, where on the other hand, you're saying, well, that's not real. That's just a projection. The figure in the dream. I'm happy to accept that figure in the dream isn't real, and try to go to that level of understanding where I can see that it's all a projection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you've got to use the language and say, well, I understand that I don't really exist. If we
no, you should be very careful. No, you should be very careful about saying I don't exist. Freddie doesn't exist, but you're not Freddie.
No, exactly. So if we're going to try and get this up to understanding more from a level 1, absolute level, we've got to accept that the figure in the dream is only an illusion. I'm trying to talk your language.
No, but so I just want to make a distinction here. We never want to say I don't exist or my brother doesn't exist. That's not what we do.
You keep saying that, Keith. You say that you don't exist. You say the world doesn't exist.
No, listen, I said Keith doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's right.
There is only a misidentification with Keith. But what I am that's identifying with Keith, right? That's the decision maker. That's not Keith. So we're saying Keith doesn't exist. That does not mean I don't exist.
I'm using the same language to describe the way I'm feeling about it myself. When I say that the figure in the dream doesn't exist, it doesn't mean that I don't exist.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm using the language that you use to just repeat back to you to let you know that I understand what you're talking about.
Perfect. Yeah,
But
and
you
the
think
only
I'm
distinction
getting
I wanted to
confused.
make was we don't say I don't exist. We say Freddie doesn't exist, but we don't say I don't exist. So that's the only thing we wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
perfect. Perfect.
Thank you.
No problem. Where shall we go next, Eli?
Okay, Lael, if you'd like to unmute yourself, you can go ahead.
I always love to unmute myself. Thank you so much,
Go for
Eli.
it, Lael.
Hi. Yes, I am wearing my pandemic era Snuggie for those of you who can see me, and I chose to allow that to be visible. Okay, so thank you beyond words, Keith, for everything. I wanted to I have a question at the end of this, but I wanted to share that I had a dream recently and this, I'm not going to go into the whole dream, but in which Jesus showed up in the person of Paul Rudd, and it was the actor Paul Rudd. Anyway, it was communicated it was Jesus, but in part of the dream, I just read this one thing because it's totally related to what we're talking about. I speak up to communicate that I used to help the sick for a living, but now I help people party. So basically, this Jesus figure in the dream commissions me to make a joyful event. And years ago, I had a clairaudient experience kind of pushing me in the direction of healing the sick, etc. And I never stepped into that because actually I really felt, I just felt very uncomfortable putting myself forward in that way. But so I wanted to share that because I feel like, you know, for me, our nighttime dreams get around they circumvent our denial. And the Holy Spirit can be very direct with us, or more direct. And so no more worrying about healing the sick, just have fun with others, as guided by the Holy Spirit, of course, only coming out of silence. I have no idea what form that's going to take exactly, but I guess it is on a daily basis, just taking the form of joy when I do this process and stay in my right mind. Now, my question, I guess it's just, I just wanted to verify something. Just like there's no order of or no hierarchies when it comes to miracles or, you know, murders, or there are no hierarchies basically, because everything's nothing except God and God and his son. Okay, good. And daughter. Someone's writing something. I'm going to ignore that. Sorry, I get confused by that. In the same way, there's no hierarchy when it comes to magic. So if someone is involved in, let's say, a healing profession, internally, they'll just experience it. I don't know. They'll just show up with love and seeing the wholeness of the other person. But it's not wrong to do that, just like it's not wrong to repair a car, or, you know, wait tables, or be a scenic designer in a theater. It's all different levels of magic, and it's all equal. There's nothing wrong with being a so-called healer, if that is, like, apparently that's no longer my calling, and I'm delighted. I'd much rather just have fun with people than, like, you know, but maybe it will be healing, I assume. But
Okay,
anyway,
no, so just on that point, I mean,
my
Jesus is
question,
very clear in
obviously.
chapter 2 that healing is not a sin, and that, you know, if fear is present in the slightest, then we shouldn't be afraid to use magic. Okay, and all he asks us to do is to choose the miracle alongside the magic. So we are with him in our mind above the battleground, and we're looking at a movie of a body that is sick and that is taking medicine and that will get better or won't. And we know with him that the whole thing is made up. All right. So that's how we choose the miracle.
It's okay to be a magician.
Yeah, but we're all magicians. Like if you take a breath, you're a magician.
Right, exactly. That's what I wanted to just verify, that, because
so you can't stop magic. You can't stop magic.
Right.
Because
okay,
Yeah, because magic says the problem's in the world, and that's where it needs to be fixed instead of in my mind. Okay. So, me having,
Yeah, no,
I'm hungry, so I got to eat. Well, that's magic. I, need a breath. That's magic. So there's no getting away from magic. So magic is not something that's awful or evil or anything else, but the miracle looks on, it reminds the mind that it dreams a dream and its content is not true. What I am is not what needs a breath. What I am is not what gets hungry. What I am, with Jesus is not what gets sick. What I am with Jesus is not the body. And in the same way, if I'm a doctor, then I know that of myself and I know that of my patient. The changelessness in me sees the changelessness in my patient. So the patient's body might die or not, but I know the patient is Christ. And that's healing, that's joining, because we're not separate. So Jesus says that all sickness is the idea of separateness and guilt, and that healing is joining. Now, joining means I know what I am and I see it in you. And we're not separate, we're one. So ideally speaking, if a doctor is very far advanced as a teacher of God, the doctor would simply see the indestructibility and the holiness within all of his patients, regardless of what's going to happen with his body. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's super helpful. I guess I needed to hear that again. Thank you so much. I had another dream 3 nights ago in which I wanted to express how much I loved Keith Kavanaugh. Now, I guess that's the Christ in Keith Kavanaugh. And in the dream, I was like shy about expressing it. So I am expressing it. I love you, my brother Keith. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, Lael. And again, the way in which the doctor practices medicine will become an expression of the love in his mind. So that there is this love, and it will merely take shape around the requirements of the moment, which could be resuscitation, which could be holding someone's hand, which could be administering medicine, whatever it is. That's just the way love is taking shape within the dream. So again, there's, we can't get away from magic, and love will take shape within the dream as required. But the miracle reminds me that none of this is true. There's nobody here dying. There's nobody here sick. There's nobody here that needs to be fixed or anything like that. So I live my life normally, and I do the magic that everyone else is doing. But in my mind, I'm with Jesus, knowing this is all made up. And if I'm seeing guilt in anything, it's my own, and I get a chance to take it back and have it removed from myself and look again at the world and see it innocent and whole and not sick. So that's
that does sound like a party, doesn't it? Thank you so much.
No problem. Where should we go next, Eli?
Keith, I thought maybe we could ask Donna if she'd like to unmute herself and ask her question that she had asked before the recording started. Donna,
if Donna would like to do that. If Donna would like to do that, yes.
Hello. I've no problem doing that. I just can't turn on my video at the moment.
We'll forgive you. We'll forgive you.
Yeah, thank you. I suppose my question was around, I have found with doing the coursework, doing some trauma healing, around childhood, very helpful. And I suppose we learn that our childhood experiences can color our world. So my question was, I wanted to know Keith's kind of perception around that in relation to the course, because I only found him recently. And I do feel it's because maybe my awareness is getting a little bit better. And I have found doing the forgiveness work that you're teaching very quick. And I just feel my awareness is getting much improved, if you know what I mean. It's very hard to put it into language because it's very hard to describe awareness, as you know.
Yeah. So you would like to know how we would see childhood trauma and how we would go about working with that following Jesus's course.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Good question. The first thing when pain is present, I say to myself, the first thing is, I am never, ever, 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 ever upset for the reason I think. Why am I not upset for the reason I think? Because I made up the reason I think I'm upset, so I wouldn't have to look at the real reason I'm upset. So if I've been abused as a child, that's the smoke screen. That's what was made up. So I did not have to look at the fact that that pain was already inside of me. Okay, I'm not a body, I'm a mind. Okay, and the world was made up to keep me as a mind from looking at the pain and the guilt and the self-hatred and the self-loathing that is inside of me because of the separateness, the belief in separateness. And so a world was made up where there's abusers and victimizers and horrors, awful things that are happening and everything else. And we look at the world and go, that's the problem. That's what did it. That's the reason for the unhappiness. That's why I have fear. And so and this just applies to absolutely everything in life. Whenever you become upset, you become anxious, you become angry, you become affronted, you have trauma. The first thing, do nothing until you understand, I am not upset for the reason I think. That's the smoke screen. That's the second part of the shield of oblivion, the world. And so I am not upset because I was victimized when I was younger. I'm upset because I'm identified with the ego and not the Holy Spirit. And the guilt and the self-hatred and the discomfort and the whole thing is appalling. It's absolutely appalling. And I deny it and I split it off and I project it out and I make a world that's going to victimize me, and I'll go, that's where the victimizing is. That's what deserves to be hated. It's not me. So that's what our forgiveness process is about. We come back out from the world. We say to Jesus or the Holy Spirit, I'm not upset for the reason I think. I accept that. This is what was already inside of me, and the world was made up so I wouldn't clear it. I would never have to look at it. I couldn't have it undone. And so our first forgiveness step is that we unwind projections. I am not upset because of what someone did to me when I was younger. I'm upset because I am identified as an ego, and now I'm projecting that into a non-existent past and go, that's the problem. It is the world is the problem. What the world did to me is the problem. It is not what I'm doing with my mind. So our first forgiveness step is I unwind projection. I step, I cast aside the second of the shields of oblivion, which is the world, and go, the world did not do this to me. What I'm experiencing is my guilt. And I made up a world not to look at it in myself. But if I look at it in myself, it's going to be removed because it's not real, because I made up the guilt as well. So the Holy Spirit can remove that. And that is going to remove the blocks to the awareness of love's presence in my mind. That's what's going to return God to my awareness. So it doesn't matter what the world appears to have done to us. What we do is we deny the second of the shield of oblivion. We say, there's no cause in the world. The world isn't causing anything. I made the world to cover up the real cause, which is my guilt over my separateness, but I don't have to stay separate. So I'm not upset because of something that happened to me in the past. I'm upset because I have thrown the Holy Spirit out of my mind. I'm not identified as a non-judgmental observer in the Holy Spirit. I'm identified as a body in the world, an insane voice talking to itself, feeling awful about itself and trying to blame the world for it. So that's our first step. And that's why it's important to understand the metaphysics here. The world is the smoke screen. It's the made up thing that keeps me from looking at the guilt. And if I look at the guilt is also made up. It was just a smoke screen against the love. And so in very real terms, what we do is we join with Jesus above the battleground and we look at the emotions and the feelings, the fear and the guilt and everything else that's happening. And we don't project it. We don't say the world did this to me. It was what was already inside of me and the reason the world did what it did. So I look at the feelings coming up and I do not say it's because of the world. I say it's because I'm choosing to be separate. So that's our first step. And then what we do is we join with the Holy Spirit and we look at what the real problem is, which is separateness, identifying as a separate self. So I'm never upset for the reason I think. I'm upset because I'm identified as an ego and not as a non-judgmental observer in the Holy Spirit. So what do? I join the Holy Spirit as a non-judgmental observer and look at my ego. I look at the feelings coming up and I go, that's there because I'm identified as a separate self. But now I'm not separate, I'm with Jesus. And if I look and wait and judge not, at some point, my fear is of not being a separate self is going to drop, and I'm going to connect as what's with Jesus above the battleground. And the minute I do that, healing happens. Now, as you're practicing the course in the beginning, that looking, waiting, and judging not is going to feel much more gradual. We could be looking and, not judging. We could be doing that for weeks. I certainly did with my anxiety in the beginning. But as you practice, you understand that the minute you touch out of identification as the separate thing and into the awareness of the non-judgmental observer I am with Jesus, then it's just gone. So it's extraordinary how quick it can become, but I don't want to make it seem like you just do this and that happens straight away and years of trauma over abuse is gone. And I don't want to minimize that. But what I am saying is that the reason there is upset and discomfort and everything else is because I'm identified as a separate thing. And I've projected that, I've denied it, I've split it off, I've projected it out, I made up a world and went, that's the problem. And the miracle retraces my steps into madness, as Jesus says. It brings me back out of the world and goes, actually, the problem is the sin, guilt, and fear in my mind. And then the Holy Spirit says, actually, that's not real either. So that's God. And here's love in your mind instead of all that. So that's our process with forgiveness. But the key thing, so this is not me saying that you deny your emotions, that you deny your fear. This is not what we're saying. This is not a course in spiritual bypassing. Okay, this is not a course of hiding out in the light and denying the darkness. This is a course where you go back into the light where Jesus is and you look on the darkness. You allow the darkness to roar and to rage inside of you, the pain and the hurt and the desire to blame and all of it. You sit with it, but you don't sit with it on your own. You sit with it with that loving, non-judgmental presence of Jesus beside you. And at some point in time, you will merge into that presence with Jesus. You look, you wait, you judge yourself not. At some point, you will slip into being what is forgiving the ego and not the ego. And when you do, whatever guilt is there is gone. Now, on that, and it just gets over and over again. I just see how important this is. The big mistake is that I'm feeling pain and trauma and hurt. And then I go, okay, what do I do? What do I do? How do I do forgiveness? And then I try to fight it. I go, now I need to go to Jesus and, I need to try and take my mind off this. Wrong. Okay. So I do understand. First thing is, I'm never upset for the reason I think, right? So I undo the belief that the world is the cause of anything. And I understand this is inside of me because I'm choosing to be a separate thing. And now the next thing I do is I completely forgive myself for identifying as the separate thing. Never, ever, ever, ever fight yourself. It's the worst thing you can do. It's what people do all the time in the group, and they go, I'm stuck in forgiveness and I can't get past it and I don't know how, and the awfulness won't go away. You're fighting the darkness. Do not fight the darkness. You're fighting your decision to be the separate thing. You can't do that as the separate thing. It just locks you more into being the separate thing. You have to do the one thing that a separate thing can't do, and that is not judge. So what you do is you say, Well, the only reason I'm upset is because I'm identifying as this Keith, this set of stories, this body in the world. That's the only reason I'm upset. And what you do is you look at the fact that that's why you're upset, and you completely forgive yourself. You join with Jesus, feel his forgiveness, join with him in the forgiveness of yourself. That, so complete non-judgment about the fact that you are now choosing to be the separate thing. The guilt in it is awful, and you're trying to project it out. You forgive yourself and you feel that forgiveness. That's what you do. Completely feel that forgiveness. And now a completely different consciousness has arisen inside of you. Now non-judgment is available to you as an experience in your mind. Now there is the darkness and there's the light. There's the darkness of guilt and judgment, and there is the light of complete non-judgment. That is so, so, so crucial. If you're taking any notes today, just underline that 50 times, tear a hole in the page. Okay, the first thing is I'm never upset for the reason I think I am. The second reason is I'm upset because I'm identifying as the illusion. And now what I have to do, the second thing that's so important, I have to completely forgive the fact that I'm identifying as the ego. That's the only thing that will take me out of being an ego. I have to do the one thing an ego can't do, which is not judge. And so what I do is I fall back and I look at the fact with Jesus that, yes, I'm choosing to be this lowest aspect of myself. The ego is the lowest aspect of what I am. It is such a tiny part of what I actually am. Again, this is not a course in deleting yourself or saying you don't exist. It's understanding you're not the ego. All your problems are because you think you're the ego. And it's a decision you're making, and you can decide against it. But the first thing you've got to do is look at the error, which is the fact that the reason you're unhappy is because you're choosing to be the separate thing, the person. And then you completely forgive it. You look at it with complete non-judgment. You connect with Jesus as a thought of perfect love in your mind. And now this new dimension of consciousness is available to you in your mind. This is your wrong mind and your right mind. You cannot have access to your right mind by fighting your wrong mind. You can only ignite your awareness of your right mind by looking at your decision for the ego without judging it, without making a big deal out of it. Now there is these two identities in my mind. There's the upset that's raging, and there's the me that's not judging it. And as Jesus says in the Course, they cannot coexist. So guilt and judgment and pain cannot coexist with non-judgment. So that's all I want to do. I want to look at the fact that I'm the cause of all my problems by identifying as the separate thing. And I want to completely forgive myself for that. It's just fear of not being the separate thing. And that has the Holy Spirit blazing in my mind as that forgiveness. So that's so essential. So, so, so essential. And then you look, wait, and judge yourself not for choosing to be the separate thing. And at some point, your fear will drop and you'll just identify with the forgiveness in your mind instead of the guilt and the pain. And when you do, all the guilt and the pain is gone. But you want to have infinite patience for yourself with that. So I hope that makes sense. So Eli, we have Jennifer and Lois. Would that be everything else that we need?
We have quite a few questions that have been waiting in the chat. So
okay, well, let's do the chat questions. Let's do Jennifer and Lois, and let's draw a line under it just so we don't go mad late.
okay, here we go. So this is from Joan. She says, okay, Keith, since the dreamer of the dream dreamt of this world with fear and guilt, how can we trust anyone?
The question is, how do I trust egos? Okay, so what it means is you've identified as an ego, you've identified as a separate self, and you're going, how do I trust other separate selves? Okay, and egos don't trust anyone because they can't trust themselves. Instead, what you want to do is fall back from your identification as an ego, and then what you are is what everyone else is. Okay, so, right, I know we're stuck on time, but let me see if I can, so this is from chapter 9, the acceptance of the atonement, paragraph 2. To the ego, it is right and kind and good to point out errors and correct them. This makes perfect sense to the ego, which is unaware of what errors are and what correction is. Errors are of the ego, and correction of errors lies in the relinquishment of the ego. Again, I've got to let go of my ego. When you correct a brother, you are telling him he is wrong. He may be making no sense at the time, and it is certain if he is speaking from ego that he will not be making sense, or maybe not be trustworthy. But your task is to still tell him he's right. You do not tell him this verbally if he's speaking foolishly. He needs correction at another level because his error is at another level. He is still right because he is a son of God. His ego is always wrong, no matter what it is. So if I'm identified as Keith, the insane voice talking to itself, I'm wrong about everything. And anyone around you who's identified an ego is wrong about everything. But you don't stop there. What you've got to do is fall back into what you are, and then you look at your brothers, and you don't stop at what their egos are doing. Of course, it's wrong. Everything is wrong. you look behind it to what is right in them, which is the awareness, which is what they are with Jesus above the battleground. So you fall back and you realize what you remember what you are, which is not the crazy voice in your head that's wrong about everything. And then you look past the crazy voice in your brother's mind and see the truth. And so all you want to do is undo your judgment. All you want to do is stop seeing them as wrong. All you want to do is stop seeing yourself as vulnerable to your brother. You know, in my defenselessness, my safety lies. Again, as long as you're identified as an insane voice talking to itself, you're going to be constantly defending yourself, going, who can I trust? Who can I not? Who's going to help me? Who's going to be useful? Who's not? So that's the defenses, okay? But it's in my defenselessness my safety lies. What does it have to do with the me that's with Jesus if I fall back from being the separate self? Well, from there, I can just see the light in my brother, no matter what his ego is doing. Because there's no egos. There's just the light of Christ behind the illusion of people and what they're doing and saying. That's what we want to be able to do. We got to find that in ourselves and see it in our brother. So I hope that makes sense. What's next, Eli?
Okay, it's Jane, and she says, can we say that people whose lives are charmed with health, wealth, success, amazing relationships, and recognition of their creativity, that their dreams are not purposive, if I'm saying that word right, as they are so reinforcing to the illusion?
You're assuming everyone's perception of things is the same. You're assuming, okay, so there's just the one dream, okay, but you're assuming that we all interpret the dream the same way, and we don't. Because there's lots of people in the world who would consider themselves incredibly lucky and fortunate to have 100,000 euros or dollars in the bank, and there are those in the world that would consider that bankruptcy. So you can't, based on the meaning, all the meaning you have given to the meaningless world, assume that that's the meaning everyone else gives to it. So what would cause, great delight for you could be a source of suffering to someone else. And what's a source of suffering for you could be a source of delight for someone else. So we can never look at someone else's dream and say, well, I know what that means. As Jesus says, there's nothing as blinding as perception of form. So that kind of makes it a slightly moot point, in the sense that it assumes that, wealthy people are happy. That's not true at all. If you're identified as an ego, you are unhappy. That's guaranteed. And if you're happy, it just means you found someone else to blame. So I wouldn't equate things like, wealth or anything like that with how happy someone is, that would be a mistake. Okay, so what should we go next?
Jennifer, you can go ahead. And so we'll do Jennifer and then Lois, and that'll be that.
Very good. Jennifer, the stage is yours.
Hi, Keith. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Okay, my question is about creation and kind of like, okay, I hear that after this, we get shown all of our incarnations. Maybe we get shown all these people that we once were. But I am wondering just about creation, and are we, if we are in our right minds down here, are we creating anything? I'm told like afterwards we might be shown our lives in retrospect and everything, including our creations on earth. And I just thought, wait, we're not are we creating here?
No.
So
So creation is heaven. Creation's in heaven. And it is God extending himself as his creations, and his creations extending God.
So when we are extending God's love,
no,
then
so Jesus talks about creation in the course, and he doesn't do it so we can understand creation, because he tells us over and over again that we can't understand creation, because creation is not happening within time and space. So nothing is getting bigger, or nothing is taking up a bigger space, and there's only one in heaven. There's only oneness. Okay, so it's not like another is ever getting created. And so Jesus is saying, you don't want to. You don't want to try and, he calls them senseless musings, where we would think about what heaven is like and go and sort of input and create it in Earth's image in some way. So he's going, don't do that, right? I'm talking to you about creation, and I want you to understand that creation is extension. I want you to understand that God extends himself to his creations, and his creations extend God. So there's just this oneness extending itself. I want you to understand. That's all I want you to understand. You can't understand anything more than that. And then he says, now I want you to reflect that in the dream. Okay. And the way we reflect that in the dream is that we extend the Holy Spirit. We fall back and remember what we are. That's not a body or an insane voice talking to itself. And having done that, we now see what we are in our brother. We're looking beyond the movie of him being sick or unhappy or with problems, and what we're firmly focused on the Holy Spirit in him. The Holy Spirit in me sees the Holy Spirit in him. That's extension within the dream, right? It's the extension of the Holy Spirit. And the love that we have in our mind when we connect with the Holy Spirit, that will extend itself through us in accordance with the needs of the moment, whether that's holding someone's hand or helping someone with money or doing something for someone. So that's extension, right? But this is not creation. Okay, so the extension within the dream is the reflection of heaven. And that's what Jesus wants us to do down here. Yes, all this is made up, but that's not enough to get us home. What we have to do is reflect the laws of heaven down here in the dream.
Okay, so when we're in our right mind, we're not going to experience heaven yet. It's just the reflection of heaven. Is that right?
It's the memory of heaven.
The memory of heaven. If we're in our right mind here, that's not our highest goal. No,
it is our highest goal. It's all we're asked to do, because then Jesus says God himself. Now, okay, metaphorically speaking, and he's sort of, speaking sort of mythologically here, but what he's saying is all you have to do is be right-minded, okay? And do that so that it undoes your wrong mind, which is your investment in the separate self, okay? And you're this pure awareness, and love, peace, and joy just extends through you and sees itself everywhere. And he said that's all you're asked to do. And then what he says is God himself will reach down and bring you back up into himself. As Jesus says in the course, the Son has disappeared into the Father, and the Father has disappeared into the Son. It's the restoration of oneness. But we don't choose that, right? That happens on the very last rung of the ladder. So A Course in Miracles is not about waking up in heaven. A Course in Miracles is about having a happy dream. And the way we have a happy dream is by reflecting heaven's laws here. Okay, heaven's laws are not here, but we want to reflect them here. Creation is not here, but we want to reflect creation here. Does that make sense?
I feel you. Thank you.
Good. Also, just in terms of the whole past lives thing, within the dream that might happen, but let's not forget that's a dream, because it's not the question isn't have you had past lives. Like, you're not even having this one. Yeah. So,
That's
so
all in
the
the dream.
awareness, yeah, because the awareness in your mind isn't a body now. Your right mind doesn't have a body and has never been in a body. So it's really just our wrong mind that's going through an incarnation whole like process. So yeah, just to make that point. So shall we go to Lois then, Eli?
Yes, Lois, you're next.
You're up, Lois.
Hi. Hi, I just want to thank you, Keith, and everybody. And I have a funny story to tell. I
Go
hope
ahead.
you want to hear it.
We definitely do.
Okay, so I'm up in North Carolina where we have a summer home, and this is my first time coming up just by myself. And
Yeah.
everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. 2 different leaks. The hot water heater didn't work, but I have wonderful neighbors who were working on the hot water heater. We have a storage shed in the back. I was in there all day looking around saying, oh my God, I got to get rid of all this stuff. And my friends were working on the hot water heater saying, well, we just probably need to buy elements for the hot water heater instead of having to spend $600 to get it replaced. Anyway, in the morning, I was in the shed and I saw these 2 silver things that I had no idea what they were. And this is so weird. They were just never there. They were just all of a sudden in my view. As my friend was leaving to go to the store to buy new elements for me, he had the rusted out elements in his hands. And wouldn't you know it, I walk out and I said, are these for the hot water heater? And he said, yes. And it was like, oh, I have an ego miracle happening. So I just thought I had to tell you, but I wanted to just say again, I have today listening is there's such a sense of peace for me. And I just love all of you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Lois. And
thanks for listening to my silly story.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And it's, there's, I mean, there's a piece in you. I know there's an awful pain in you, Lois, but there's a piece in you that's palpable there as well. So, you just keep having your 2 minds present there. You're doing really well. Much
Thank
love
you.
to
Thank you.
Lois.
All
Yeah,
right,
thank you
guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks for sharing.
You're
Okay,
welcome.
guys. Thank you very much for sticking with me on this contentious issue. I hope you got something out of today's meeting, and we shall do it all again next week. Just a quick mention that I am doing a Miracle Cafe talk for the Miracle Network on Tuesday. And we're going to talk about the mechanics of the miracle. So we're going to talk about it in detail and take questions and answers about that. So if you wanted to join, I'll put the link in the description on YouTube in case you're a YouTube subscriber, and I'll put it in the group as well. So if you're not sick of listening to me, you can catch me again then. And otherwise, we'll talk to you next Sunday. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Whatever else you do for the rest
Thanks
of the
so
Sunday,
much, Keith.
do it
Thank
with
you.
Jesus.
Bye.
Love you all.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.